Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda Lewis with the Tulsa Regional Chamber. Welcome to this segment of the Build program, which is a series of webinars aimed at providing education and resources to small business owners and their growing team of leaders. The presenting sponsors for the Build program are the Persimmon Group and Security Bank. Thank you so much to these sponsors for making the Build program possible. An additional thank you for their generous support is to our small business benefactors who support and make the program of work possible for the Small Business Connection. Those are Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oklahoma, TEDC Creative Capital, and Tulsa Federal Credit Union. Today's segment of the Build program is entitled Your DE&I Playbook, which will feature the expertise of John Baker, Director of Field Engineering and Deployment at Aristocrat Technologies. John, thank you so much for joining us. I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Let me share my screen. So hello and welcome everyone to the Business University Inspirational Leadership Development, known as BUILD, module on your DE&I Playbook. My name is John Baker, as was stated. I work for Aristocrat, and in this capacity, I'll come to you as the Tulsa Metro Area D&I Chairman for Aristocrat. I also serve on the America's D&I Board for the company that covers North and South America and Canada. I'm here to talk to you today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will discover ways to build your company's playbook to allow for the best opportunity for the culture to flourish and your people to thrive. We will reveal ways for DE&I to bring together your people, your customers, and your shareholders. Let's take a look at the agenda and see what's inside. Okay, we will talk about key DE&I concepts, go through a few tips and tricks for things to do in the workplace, talk about implementing DE&I concepts, putting those tips and tricks to practice. We'll talk about guidelines and useful tools. How do we measure ourselves? Then we'll get into a little bit of the HR and talk about increasing visibility during hiring, integrating the culture in the workplace, and we'll close things out talking about resources, measures, and evaluations. First, let's define what is diversity, equity, and inclusion. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to define diversity as all the ways that which people differ. It is the representation that makes up the entity. Equity, I'm going to define as the process of ensuring the processes and programs are impartial, fair, and provide equal possible outcomes for every individual. That's important. It's about the fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people around the table. Let's not let a person's identity predetermine the outcome. And lastly, inclusion will be about how well all the contributions, presence, and perspectives of the different groups of people are valued and integrated into the environment, into the conversation. It's about allowing multiple seats at the table. We want to ensure that the variety of people at the table have a voice, have power, and have the ability to make decisions. We want to ensure that people feel a sense of belonging and that they are part of the process. Now, what are some of the concepts around that? We want to think globally and act locally. What is your company's impact and effectiveness outside of your region globally? How do you want to be perceived? Think about that as you develop your DE&I strategy. On a local level, you want to ensure that your culture, strategies, and perceptions of your company feel right for that region. They fit the environment. They have to be a representation of your people, what your customer base looks like, and what you want your brand to be. Next, let's talk about the employee experience. We're talking about from when an employee starts, as they work within their teams, as they work with their customers, and as they move from team to team. We want to think about how they work. What are their strengths? How can they be flexible in the work arrangements? How can you be flexible in working arrangements based on that person's skills and attributes? At the end of the day, DE&I comes down to looking at a person's skills and attributes instead of the other things that they're wrapped in. We also want to look at career paths. We want to be flexible and open for all employees to take on new roles and new challenges. We don't want to stereotype anyone into any specific spot. And we'll talk about those biases as we go through the presentation. We want to foster human connections and purpose versus stereotypical styles. And lastly, we want accountability, both from leaders and the individual contributor level. So everyone has to take a part in this. And if you look along the bottom of the screen, there are some other kind of buzzwords and concepts that I'll be talking about as we go through the presentation. They are unconscious bias, and I'm sure we've all heard of that before, microaggressions, access, who has access to what, ally, or you may hear it as allyship, how can we partner together, and also the entire work-life balance experience. Next, we'll kind of talk about maneuvering through the workplace. Here are some things for all employees to be mindful of and also guidelines to take. Some of the concepts and words and things, stereotypes that happen are in the words that I have on the screen right here. They are gender. Are you looking for a male or female, or are you pinballing yourself or pinholing yourself into looking for one particular style versus another? Think about the military and how it used to be all male, but now there are women in it. Think about some other careers that used to be dominated by males, but now we allow women in it. And I can tell you, for my Washington football team, has one of the first women coaches ever. So that's phenomenal. And those are the things we try to do to have that diversity, equity, and inclusion at the table. We're going to look at ageism, younger versus older. Typically in companies, as people get older, they appear to be less efficient or pinholed into certain structures. But you have to remember, you have a lot of wisdom and power as people get older and they're on jobs longer. Names, look at the distinction between names. Are you looking for a Becky Henderson or a Shanae Robinson? Don't let those names affect you. Again, it goes back to, what are the qualifications of the person? What are the roles you're trying to fill? And is that the match that you're looking for? Some other words I'll go through here. Beauty. Think about how that can affect. Are you just looking for that attractive person for the job, or are you looking for the person who can do the work the best? Halo effect. Robin is always so nice. I think she can do the job just because she's so nice, or does she have the qualifications? Or the horn effect. Robert is always so judgmental and he's always to the point. Is that something you need in a particular job? And do you count him out just because he always speaks up? I go through some others: confirmation, affinity, contrast. You want different styles of people on your team, not everyone fitting the same mold. I like to tell my team at work that I like the variety of people because everyone has a different strength. And I use those different strengths combined together to make a high-performing team. Status quo, people always following the same line. Authority, someone who's always bossing around in maneuvering people. How can you put that person in a place that offers that strength instead of just discounting them? And conformity, again, it's kind of like the yes man, everyone is saying yes around the table. Okay, so adding on to that, how can we fight back against some of these unconscious biases? First thing there is to make sure employees understand the stereotypes and the foundation for the bias. I'm going to talk a little later about different training tools and tips that you can take to uncover what some of those unconscious biases are. It may make people feel a little uncomfortable, but it also brings them around to understanding what their biases are so that they can better combat them or better be aware of them to use them as they go through a diverse, equity, and inclusive workplace. Set expectations. What expectations are you talking about, John? I'm talking about emphasizing the objectives. What is the goal that we're trying to meet? Having clearly defined objectives and key results. Set expectations early. Don't let a group fester for months and years without having the clear sense of what's going to happen, where are we going. Set those expectations early. And when I say expectations, I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Talk about what will be allowed, what's acceptable, how we're trying to move forward. And I'll talk a little bit about the culture later. Making employees accountable. When someone messes up or someone crosses the line, that needs to be called out. It can't be brushed under the rug. Give meaningful feedback. One-on-one conversations with employees, from leader to employee, on here are our expectations. Here's where you may have fell short on those expectations. Here's where we can do better. That's an inclusive conversation. Leveraging motivation. You're always going to have some outspoken folks in the crowd, some folks who are jumping on the bandwagon early, understand the concepts and the culture and the inclusive environment that you are trying to create. Those are the folks that you want to use as part of your team. So it's just not you with your single voice. It's a group of people, and you'll see that group grow and grow and grow. And that's exactly what you want. And then the last thing is making it measurable. The concepts and objectives that you create, you want to have checkpoints and make that measurable, and we'll go into that as well. The last thing is you want to promote dialogue. One great thing that we did at Aristocrat in our Tulsa D&I group, we had a Let's Talk series. And what that series is we would create a topic, and then we would get a group of people to come together and talk about that topic. As you know, in Tulsa, we just went through 100 years anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So one of the topics that came up of discussion was about race and racism. Now you could say, ooh, that's a scary topic to talk about at work. Well, we created a safe space, a safe environment. We invited people in. Basically, we defined what that meant, but not to just one person, to multiple people. So you could see different people's perspectives and how it affected, or more importantly, did not affect them. And we had to respect each other's opinion. Then we talked about things that have happened. And more importantly, we moved to, so what can we do about it? What's next? We put some action plans together about how employees could better educate themselves, be better aware, and how we could move forward as one group to not let history repeat itself, but to move forward together. And it was a tremendous and a great experience. Next thing we'll kind of talk about are implementing concepts in the workplace, I'm going to talk about from what we need to promote and also what we need to improve. When I say promote, I mean what we need to grow, to progress, and to raise to a higher level. When I talk about improvements, I'm going to be talking about what do we need to develop? What do we need to make better? What do we need to advance? So let's first talk about what it is we need to promote. First, we need to be aware of those unconscious biases. What are the things that we inherently do that we don't realize that we may subject a certain group of people out of a certain opportunity? We want to communicate the importance of managing those unconscious biases. Here at Aristocrat, we had all of our leaders and frontline employees go through unconscious bias training. And there was a lot of rich learnings in that, a lot of things that people, well, I've just been doing that all my life. I had no idea. And it didn't matter what your race was, what your age was, everyone has unconscious biases, and everyone should be made aware of what they are so that you can better manage them in the workplace. We also want to talk about promoting pay equity. As we talk about male versus female, younger versus older, your pay should be based on the quality and skill level of your work, not whether you're a male or female, not whether you're younger or older, not whether you came from a certain technology background or not. We also want to make it easier for employees to participate in events. One thing we learned here at Aristocrat was we can set up all of these great events, but can our exempt and non-exempt employees get the time to get to the events? So you can do all the proper planning you want, but you must make sure that leaders have buy-in and that they allow their employees the time to get to events. The next thing we'll talk about is mixing up your teams. How diverse are the teams you have around the table? What are the flexibility and differences in the ideas that come up so that you can be the most innovative and the most inspirational company you can be? We'll talk about developing strategies for training programs. What are the different training tools that we need to be successful in a more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive environment? And finally, this is a fun one, knowledge about cultural holidays. Now, I'm not talking about having, because it's, we're representing Asians or Italians or different groups. So we're going to have a feast day. We're not talking about doing that all the time. Trust me, my company has gone through those pitfalls. What we're talking about is education. What's something about that culture that people may not know? What's something that we could share that will open your eyes to understand the person sitting across the table from you? Next, we want to talk about what are the things that we can improve. These are some things that might be going great, but you want to get to the next level. One thing I work with my team all the time is how can we go from great to even greater? How do we get to that next level? Some of the things that we can do is build an inclusive company culture. And you'll hear me talk a lot about that as we go through this presentation. Company culture is important because does it fit everyone? Does everyone feel included? Acting on feedback. When your employees respond and say, hey, I don't feel like I had an opportunity. Hey, I don't feel like I'm included. What do you do with that information? How can you be better at not just listening, but acting on that information in the appropriate way? Another one is revisiting employee benefits. Understand that employees come from different cultures and different backgrounds and have different needs. So look at that and as it relates to company benefits. Sponsor employee resource groups. This is another fun topic for me. Employee resource groups basically collect a group of people with similar interests or similar knowledge together so that they can have a sense of belonging. It also invites people in that maybe don't have that knowledge so that they can learn what that is. And you do it in a safe space and in smaller environments where people can really get to interact. And I'll talk about some fun things we've done at Aristocrat here in a minute. Pay attention to pay equity. And again, younger, older, male, female, all the demographics that you can think about. You want equal pay for the quality and skill set of the person doing the job. And that's something for your HR, people and culture organizations to really hone in on. We want to talk about building fair hiring processes. How do you go through the hiring process? I'll talk about what happens in the interview process, what happens in the resume screening, what happens in the panel that's created. We want to improve on those things. We want to involve the entire team. So listen to that feedback from the team and make sure that feedback gets to leadership and is heard and understood and acted on. Last thing here we want to talk about is setting key performance indicators. As I said before, you can set goals, but if you don't measure those goals and find out where you started from and where you are, what was the purpose to begin with? So you want to have those key performance indicators to dictate and tell you how you're doing at that particular time. Next thing we want to talk about is kind of guidelines and useful tools. If you look on the left, you'll see a circle with different descriptions there. And these are really important. First, you have your DE&I strategy. Then you have your leadership commitments to that strategy. You have recruiting and hiring a diverse workforce, performance management. It's a group effort. It's not just an individual effort. Company culture. You'll hear me repeat that over and over. Does it touch every employee? Can everyone relate to that culture? And then finally, you have your impact internally and externally. How are you perceived? How are you perceived by employees as a company? How are you perceived as your customers as a company? And I'll tell how that effect will show your standing in the community. The main point I wanted to stress here is you have all of these different components. And as you start road down your DE&I strategy, you're going to find that you're stronger and weaker in different components. All of these components need to be worked on. Don't take any of them for granted. Even if you're strong in a component, how do you stay strong? How do you get stronger? And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But all of these points on the circle are very important. And I made it a circle, not a hierarchy thing, because they all need attention. You have to be connected with each one of these things. Okay, moving over to the right side of the page, how do we get our return on investment on this DE&I thing that we're talking about here? What do we do about that? First, setting our goal. We want to start off with a measure of the company. What Aristocrat did to start off, we had a few surveys that we gave to employees, and we've been doing this for several years now. So as we got started, we went out with some surveys, and there's a lot of good tools online, surveys that'll fit your company's culture, of kind of how much did people know about DE&I? Could they define what diversity, equity, and inclusion was? What did they know about unconscious bias? And it's a litany of questions, and you score yourself as an individual, score yourself as a company. And there's no right or wrong score there. After you do that, you come together in a small group and you identify what are the gaps, what are the biases that have crept into our organization, where do we have low representation, where do we detect false glass ceilings for people, and what can we do about it? After you've got those gaps identified, you put plans in place, and you don't take a plan and try and conquer the world all at once. Take things in small bites and communicate that. Hey, we found these 10 things that we want to work on over the next 6 months, over the next 12 months. We're going to work on these 3 things and get a little bit better at those things. So they're in workable parts, and then you can have measurable outcomes as you get that return on investment. Last thing there, we want evaluation. We want to create milestones. We want to have check-ins with our leadership and employees so that they understand what are the things that are going on with DE&I. And that bottom section, the return on investment, that will center around training development, things that can be created, promotion opportunities that can be put in place, measuring the workplace culture, and your human resources, those employee engagement and public reputation are all great things. Okay, on this slide, we really want to talk about increasing visibility in your hiring practices. How do we attract a diverse talent pool? We want to talk about our culture. Have a strong company culture that breeds energy and passion into the workforce. Your recruiting goals. Let's create targets to reach the company in a diverse way and really touch into the workforce. We want to really have alignment, that is leadership and employees have an effect in the community that makes your place a great place to work. So your company culture and how your leadership responds to its employees have a reflection out to your customers, have a reflection out to your community. Because whatever your company culture is, your employees go home and they go into other groups and they talk about your company. So do you want them saying positive things like, yes, this is an open and inclusive workplace, or man, no, I didn't get that opportunity and I think it was because of X. So your culture has a reputation, and that reputation will go out in the community, and that's what determines, should I even apply at that company? So a lot of those things make a big difference. At the bottom of the screen there, we want to define what diversity means to your company. I gave you a definition for the purposes of this presentation. You have to look at your culture and define what diversity means to your company within that culture. We want to create more inclusive job descriptions. Some of the things you could put on job descriptions are lead with sensitive, thoughtful, inclusive language, ditch superficial requirements for and look at being more interpersonal. Emphasize your company's components to create a workplace of belonging and a sense of belonging, and becoming more self-aware, understanding what the biases are out there and take those out of job descriptions. You want to personalize your equal opportunity hiring statement, complete blind resumes. One great thing we do here is we'll take resumes and scratch off the name, scratch off the age, and scratch off of some of those unimportant elements and get it down to what I said before. What are the skills and qualifications a person needs for this particular job? Lastly, we want to use a diverse interview panel. If everyone on the interview panel looks the same and thinks the same, what do you think you're going to hire? If you're really going for a diverse workforce, you have to have a diverse panel to hire that workforce. Okay, rounding things out here, we want to talk about culture and the workplace. A few points that I'll go through here. We want to look at leadership training. Part of leadership training is about teaching participants the power of influence over and around, the power of influence for those people that are around them. We also want to look at how they uncover the elements of motivation and show how to motivate your team. When we're looking at inclusion councils, an example of an inclusion council here at Aristocrat, we have the Tulsa Metro DEI Council and Campaign Team. So our council is made up of a smaller group of people. It's 12 people from diverse backgrounds, and it includes different people that are over parts of the campaigns. We have an education campaign, a communications campaign, a community engagement campaign, and an employee engagement campaign. And I have a person who chairs each one of those campaigns. They also represent those groups on our council. And then there are 3 other at-large leaders that we have on that council. And we kind of talk about what is our strategic direction? What are the things we want to accomplish? What are the 2 or 3 things we want to set as goals for the next 6 months? Also here at Aristocrat, we have a larger America's DE&I team. And I said America's was really North and South America and Canada. So that group gives the overall reaching strategy for what the smaller groups will go through. And last but not least, we have our employee impact groups is what we call them. And those impact groups are very special. They're made up of people who have something in common, like they're all veterans or LGBTQ community or African Americans. You think of the group, we have it, Latin American groups. They're a group of people that come together with a common goal. And then they talk about strategies of how can we be better? How can our voice be heard? How can we make ourselves more accessible to the company? How can we be of value? And then periodically people will come into those smaller groups and say, hey, I want to learn more. I hope this is a safe space, and we make it that way. Other things we want to do is to celebrate employee differences. Like I said, don't go crazy with different food days. It's about education and awareness. One thing we've done here at Aristocrat, we had an awareness bowl where we put together certain ethnic type questions, and it's in a big syllabus. It turned out to be maybe 500 different questions. So people would create diverse teams and come in, study the study guide, and then we'd have like Jeopardy style competitions where we ask questions. You had an opportunity to get the question right or wrong. If you got it wrong, the other team could steal, and you build up points. And we had a winner. And man, I'll tell you, it was a big success at the company. If you're interested in doing something like that, I'd love to give you more information. Also, listening to employees is very important. Listen to understand what the employee is saying, and then try to make some actionable items from that if it's appropriate. Holding more effective meetings, that's about understanding the dynamics around you. Who's in the room? What do I need to get across the different styles of people in the room? And then lastly, communicate your goals and measure your progress, as I've talked about before. Okay, one of the last things I'll talk about here is resources to evaluate growth and learning. On the left-hand side here, I'll really talk about training and education. DE&I training is critical to build a safe and equitable workplace for all employees. It has the potential to help an organization uncover hidden biases and address unfair hiring and development practices. It can also benefit the company's culture, boost growth potential, and change the lives of your employees forever. Some of the tools that you can use to do this are really your find DE&I books. There's a lot of great authors out on the web, and I have some that I can share with you. Training courses. There's a lot of external training courses that you can do individualized in small groups, or you can have people come in and host training courses. And then another important thing is to partner with other companies. Aristocrat has partnered with the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce in the Mosaic Group, and that is a very powerful group that brings different companies together from a DE&I perspective, and they share stories and have experiences and go through training together, and then have conversations about what that training meant. And then you can take those different things that you've collected back to your company and make your company's DEI experience an even stronger one. Also here at Aristocrat, we have that campaign group that I talked to you about, the training campaign. And it's kind of fun because they'll make training videos with employees from the company in it and do role playing. So it's kind of funny to see your fellow peers there. We'll do that for small groups and we'll do that for larger groups. So it's a really fun experience and you make that a fun time. Some of the things to be aware of, fatigue, overwhelm, and cynicism. As you go through your DE&I path, there's always going to be naysayers. In anything you do in life, there's going to be naysayers. You have to make a choice to stay the course and move things forward. Another thing is data. Once you get all these data points and information come in, don't try to interpret everything at one time. Pick 2 to 3 elements that you want to focus on those and improve them. Let your employees know that that's what you're focusing on, and then move that forward. Executive state of mind. Leadership has to have buy-in into the things that you want to do with DE&I. So go your leaders, so goes the team. And then so goes your executive leadership, so goes your frontline leaders. Executive leadership needs to be bought into the culture and the concept. Leaders need to be bought in, and that will bring your employees and individual contributors into the mix. Have integrated skills-based inclusive training. I've talked to you about that before. Look at the different training offerings that are there. And I would say go out of the norm of what the style and type of training your company normally offers. If your company has a lot of internal company internal tool training, think about going outside. Think about bringing a fresh face in. Think about doing something different because when there's something new and fresh, you react to it a little differently. You respond a little differently. Also have a sophisticated DE&I teams and roles. I talked to you about how we were set up with our Tulsa Metro DE&I Council, and then we have different campaign teams that focus on specific things. And then we have an overarching America's DE&I Council that gives us strategic direction for everything. Accountability through performance management. Make DE&I a performance management goal. Take 2 or 3 objectives and put those on people's performance goals for the year. Once it becomes a part of your performance goal, I guarantee you people will focus and pay attention. And then have a true definition of diversity. As I said before, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to your company? How does it match the culture that you have created? Do you need to adjust the culture to have more inclusive language of all people? So you have to hone that and weave it into the fabric of your company's culture. And the last thing here is those employee resource groups. I can't stress that enough. People get a sense of belonging when they're around people they're comfortable with. That's the base of everything. So if you can create those groups, get those groups comfortable with each other, the next step that Aristocrat took was we had those groups partner with another group. So now you're integrating things. And then we have larger sessions when all the groups come together and they participate in things. So you've created a group, you've expanded the network, now you have an entire company culture. And that's the most effective way you can build a diverse and inclusive workforce. So I'll close things out here with the journey towards equality, inclusion, and justice won't be easy or short. But with our collective commitment to taking an active role in it, we can move the needle and maybe even find joy along the way. I hope this was informative for you. Again, my name is John Baker. Here is my contact information. I am more than happy to work with anyone on a one-on-one or come to your company and we can talk about ways to create, start, improve, enrich your DE&I experience. And with that, I will turn it back to Brenda.
John, thank you so much. Such good information in here, especially for our smaller employers and their employees. That I know there'll be a lot of screenshots taken throughout this presentation, but I wanted to have some time for some Q&A. And so, okay, we've talked about it. We've talked about what we should do, but how does a company get started? Where do they start?
That's a great question. I think a good way for a company to get started is to find the small group of people who are really invested in wanting to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion. Get those folks together and form that as your first inclusion council. Other things that we did here at Aristocrat is we went online and found a few surveys that we could give out to small groups of employees and to larger groups of employees, just to pulse check. How much do people know about diversity, equity, and inclusion? How much do they want to know about it? Do they think there are any problems here, or do we think we're going along just fine as we are? So you find, you get those survey results, come back to the group, have a conversation, figure out where your gaps are, and that will really give you the springboard on where you need to go next.
And speaking of surveys, it's a good to my next question. So you get started, but how do you know that you're having any success?
That's another interesting question. The way we kind of stumbled into knowing we had success is people felt uncomfortable. Some people started pushing back. And then we dug into why is this small set of folks pushing back? It's because they feel uncomfortable. Well, in a sense, that's what we want. We want unconscious biases to be revealed. And it's not to get anybody in trouble. And it's not necessarily, I always tell my folks, it's not necessarily to, I don't want to change who you are. All I want to do is put us in a place where we can understand how each other operates so that we can work better together. I always preach that I'm focused on your skill set, what you bring to the table, what your strengths are, and I want to use that in a way that everyone else around the table can accept it. So that those are some of the ways that we kind of could tell, are we making success or not? We also put some measures in place. If we were trying to achieve a specific objective, how far did we get? You know, one thing was with our newsletters. We have a lot of historical and training information in a newsletter that we send out in a quarterly basis. You know, how far did the distribution go? How many people bothered to open up the document? How many people had feedback in all hands meetings and other places? So that gave us a pulse on how effective that vehicle for communication was for us.
And John, an interesting point that stood out to me as you were talking about how to have inclusive language, you mentioned to have an inclusive job description. Can you give an example of what that might look like?
So yes, you know, typically in our job descriptions, we're focusing on historical sector of people. And I'll take my job, what my folks do in field engineering. You know, a field engineer, that already has an unconscious bias of you're looking for a male engineer. So in your job descriptions, you want to take away any masculine hard words that move a person to think just male and open it up to more streamlined, sensitive words that include everyone. You want to make those job descriptions focus on the type of work that's being done and the requirements to get it done, not any physical requirements or coming from certain areas or doing certain things.
That's so helpful, especially as, again, as I've mentioned, for our smaller employers that are maybe expanding and looking for new positions, how to position themselves in a place to be more successful in that hiring realm. My final question for you is a little personal one. So what are some pitfalls you've had in putting your DEI playbook together?
So some of the pitfalls in putting this document together, or just our overall DEI at our company. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So some of the pitfalls that we ran into is in the beginning, we got caught up in trying to change the entire world. We put out a few surveys And then there was a big list of differences of opinion, different pulse checks on where we were as a company. And we tried to change too much too fast. And we weren't effective, because if you try to wrap your hands around too much, you're not going to accomplish anything. So we had to pull back and say, what are the 2 or 3 things we could focus on, make a difference, get a handful of people on board, and then move to the next 2 things. Make a difference, get another handful of people on board, and then move to the next 2 things. So it was trying to take on too much at one time was the biggest pitfall that we had. And I'll say another great thing that we did was we created that small council, and then we created the campaign teams. Because you're going to find in your road to DE&I, different people have different strengths, different people have different likes. We have some people that like putting together communications documents. We have other people who like figuring out training manuals and how to do training. We have yet other people who like to go out and be involved in the community. So if you try to put the wrong peg in the wrong hole, you're not going to be successful. So you give people an opportunity to choose where they want to make a difference. Yeah, and it's also, do you want to be in front of the camera, or do you want to be behind the camera? Do you want to be the creator, or do you want to be the producer? So you give people that flexibility, and then it makes it an inclusive environment.
John, thank you so much for such great information and advice. And I see that you shared your contact information, so I know that folks that would like to reach out to you certainly will. And thank you for your time today. And I'll have you, you can stop sharing your screen now. You are off the hook.
All right, sounds good. This is an enjoyable experience. And again, I want to thank the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity. I think the Chamber does excellent things in the community. They've been an excellent partner with Aristocrat, and we definitely want to keep that relationship going.
John, thank you so much, and for your kind words. We appreciate that. I guess that's all we have for now. John, again, thank you for serving as our expert on this session of the Build program called Your DEI Playbook. Again, thank you to our generous sponsors as well who made today possible. To our viewers, thank you for joining us. We hope that this session provided you with knowledge and insight to better support your business now and in the future. Please check out future segments of the Build program on our website or on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next time. Thank you.